Okay, let's get started. So I wanted to welcome everyone to this first Zoom assembly of Architects for Tempelhof. Yeah, I'll be kind of moderating throughout the evening. My name is Vika, and I'm an architect here in Berlin. And today in this assembly, we also have the other current members, which is Jolene, Malte, Martina, Shalini, Jochen, Josh, Nathan, Chiara, and Fanny. And some of them will be speaking later today, but I just want to name everyone who's been part of this initial group. We're so grateful for the overwhelming response of everyone, to this kind of assembly that we've put out. So first, I'll just talk a little bit about the structure of how we're kind of structuring the next 60 minutes. First of all, the chat is open. So if you have questions or comments, just put them in the chat, and you can do it in German or English. We can respond in both languages. In this call, because we have such limited time, we won't be taking kind of verbal questions. So please mute yourself. For future events, this hopefully will change. But for now, the chat room is the place for you to have all the discussions. And yeah, so the structure is going to be like this. First, we'll introduce basically ourselves. What is Architects for Tempelhof? Why are we doing this? Yeah, why are we here today? Then we'll hear from the 100% Tempelhof initiative, which has been fighting for Tempelhofer Feld for a long time. They're behind the referendum in 2014. So they'll give a presentation speaking about their point of view as citizens, as sort of engaged participants in this process. And then after that, also we'll take some questions from the chat. So during that presentation already, if you have questions, put them there, and we'll try to pick up on a few of them. We probably won't be getting to all of them, but please do post them. And after that, we'll have a short presentation from the landscape architects and experts on natural resources, Shalini and Fanny from our team, and they'll be talking about ecological aspects of the field. And finally, after basically this input talks, we'll get to kind of the boldest question we have tonight, which is how not to build. And we'll be also asking you for your opinion. And just a spoiler, we don't have an answer yet. This is why we're here, to figure that out. And finally, at the end, we'll talk about next steps. There is already a next meeting planned on December 3rd. So stick around if you want to know how we're continuing this. And with that, I'm giving the word to my colleagues, Jolene and Malte.
Hi, everyone. I would like to just start with a teaser that maybe some of you already have seen.
You should never demolish the emptiness of Tempelhof. You should not even take 1 square meter of this dimension.
Hi, everyone. I would like to start with the response we received from Jean-Philippe Basal regarding our concern. Yeah, I will read it now. Dear architects for Tempelhofer Feld, of course, it should be kept intact and free from any urban thought or attempt to control as a huge, magical, and unique place in the world within a great capital, from where one can see the horizon, dream, and escape for each and every citizen of the city. Not a single square meter can be lost. There are so many other places inside Berlin to make the new housing needed without speculation. Good meeting, best, Jean-Philippe. So Architects for Tempelhofer Feld is a growing network of professional architects, landscape architects, and urban planners. Our goal is clear: to safeguard Tempelhofer Feld from building, development, and defend its role as a vital space for democratic value now under potential threat. Building on Tempelhofer Feld would increase surrounding property values and limit accessibility. To make this mistake in the name of the housing shortage would be to replace today's speculation with tomorrow's green speculation. This cause is getting a great response. We are here gathered today. Let me shortly look. Around 200 participants from all over the world. It also shows us that the preservation of the Tempelhofer Feld is not a local issue, but it's attracting international attention.
I will continue what Malta was saying, that 10 years ago, a citizens' referendum successfully overturned the city's plans to build on Tempelhofer Feld. Today, the city announced a new international idea competition with the intent to develop the field, undoing the previous democratic process. Even as recently as September this year, a randomly selected citizens' dialogue workshop confirmed the 2014 referendum and unanimously rejected a development. We do not deny the housing shortage, instead point towards alternative solutions. The Urban Development Program for 2040 developed alternatives to create affordable housing outside Tempelhofer Feld in a sustainable and ecological way. Also, the time frame of the competition is so short that it seems unrealistic to propose a serious basis for the use of Tempelhofer Feld. This underlines the instrumentalization of the architects for the political interests of the Berlin Senate. And this is the very reason why we Architects for Tempelhofer Feld decided to gather all of you today to react as planners from all around the world. I would like to end with a quote which resonated a lot with us. Emptiness has a space and silence has a voice.
Thank you, Jolene and Malte. One thing that was said in the chat, it would be great if people, if you can and feel comfortable with it, turn on your cameras. Just it's nice to see who is in the room. No worries if for whatever reason you don't want to, that's also perfectly fine. I do have a question for all of you, which is, what is your professional background? And for that, we have a quiz or poll. You should be seeing that on your screen. And there's going to be about, a lot of architects. I can see the live responses, like 70% or something. Okay, I'll leave that up for a minute. And in the meantime, I'll be introducing our guest speakers, 100% Tempelhofer Feld. So they are the organizers of the original referendum in 2014. So they're really behind why the Feld at the current moment is protected by law. And they have even written that law. So it's really an honor that they're speaking to us today, because since then, also they've been continually engaged in protecting and developing the field. And so they'll be sharing with us what the field means to them, to Berlin, how they're protecting it and why it is also currently in danger. And with that, I give the word to Esther, and I'm going to close the poll, if that's okay. All right.
Thank you so much, Bika. My name is Esther Witt. I am part of the Citizens Initiative 100% Tempelhofer Feld. I'm born and raised in Berlin, and I joined the initiative 11 years ago, which I really realized when I look at the photos from back then, I have to say. So I joined during the high times of the campaign and the referendum, and since then have been part of the struggle, sometimes more, sometimes less. And before I start with my presentation, in the name of Tempelhofer Feld of 100%, I want to thank you. Thank you, Architects for Tempelhofer Feld. It's really one of the amazing dynamics of the Tempelhofer Feld, that it really brings people together that otherwise you wouldn't meet. And really, we are so honored to be part of this, to collaborate with you, to learn from you, from your expertise. So thank you so much for making it possible. And then we also want to thank the audience. 220 participants is honestly an amazing number for any Zoom call, for a first assembly. So we really don't take it for granted that you come and that you're interested in this. Of course, we think that this is the most important topic, then everybody should talk about it. But it's really it's really inspiring to see that other people are also interested in the perspective of local initiatives around this. So thank you so much. What I will try to do is, I want to give you a quick overview, again, what the Feld means to us in Berlin, what Berlin did to save the Feld, and lastly, what the situation is right now. So the context of the competition, so that, you know, for all of those architects, you see a little bit more what you're getting into and what what happened in all of the previous seasons of the Feld, to say it like that. So quick disclaimer, of course, this is our perspective. We are citizens turned activists in the city that we live in, and we're nothing more and nothing less. It is important to us to research and to collaborate with experts, such as your group. We will also quote sources. We also have a little bit of, links prepared for you so that you can actually see that, we're not just talking about emotions, but it's actually also fact-based. But we are not neutral. We deeply believe that it's in the best interest for everybody if the Tempelhofer Feld stays more or less the way that it is right now. And we are all volunteers because we deeply believe in that cause. So no one of us is paid to do this. We're all just, in it because we really believe in it. And now I will start by telling you a little bit our side of the story, because I think especially for those of you who might be new to the whole debate, it might be a little bit surprising. I hope the screen share works, perfect. Why we are so obsessed with the Feld. What is it about it, of these 300 hectares of inner city green space, and whether it's, why is it not just like any other green space that should be protected? And yes, that's absolutely true, but also the Feld is a lot more. It's really more for us in Berlin. So maybe if I start looking through it, you can already see on this map that the Feld is a super, super visible place from space even. And that really everything in Berlin in many ways is connected to this little field. This is the the outline of the field, just for you to have a little bit of an overview. There's the inner circle of the field that is protected, just like the rest of the field is protected, but even more so. And then there's the outer side of the field. This is typically where all of the construction plans always start. That's why it's red, because it's in acute danger. The building is not part of the Tempelhofer Feld and the law as such. But it's, of course, it belongs to the Feld in a way, but not with the law that we have written for various reasons. So what is the meaning of the Feld for Berlin? Why are we so obsessed with it? I think for us, past, present, and future of our city in many ways is closely linked to the Feld. And quite literally from the beginning of the city, the Feld was a distinct place. And it went through the same dramatic history as the whole city in itself. It has always been a place of recreation for Berliners to relax, to enjoy nature, to come together. But it was also a place for innovation and dreams. I think that's super obvious with when you look at the history, for example, of aviation. But it's also a memorial for the darkest times of the city, the Third Reich. It's connected to the very first concentration camp of the city. And also on the Feld, there was there's an extensive history of forced labor. So really, it's also a place to remember and to look back. The building itself obviously is so connected to the Third Reich and fascism in many ways that it's also something that we cannot skip over and don't want to skip over. And then lastly, it was also the place of the Berlin airlift, the place of hope. So I was born in 1990, but if you talk to older members of our initiative, and we are really quite a diverse group of people, for a lot of them, their very first association with the Feld was the Berlin airlift, and how relieved they felt when they would hear the engines, when they saw the planes landing. So for almost a whole year, the Feld literally meant survival. And not just survival, but survival in an unexpected and interesting and quite creative way. So former enemies tirelessly working around the clock to keep civilians nourished in the city. Pilots throwing out candy to give the children of Berlin a little bit of joy. That was the Feld for all of the people in West Berlin, including my own grandparents. So after decades of commercial air traffic, the government decided to close the airport in 2008. And in 2010, it was opened as a park to the public. And really, I would say everything that I mentioned, a place to remember, to come together, to dream, to hope, to experiment, to think out of the box. I think that's still very much true. And that's what leads us to the present right now. The Feld is the most popular park in the city. On a good weather day, it can have up to 90,000 visitors. 90,000. That's 20,000 more people that fit into the Olympia Stadium, the city's biggest stadium. And again, it's the place for recreational activities. It's the place to be. But it's also a place for sports activities. It's the biggest urban space for sport in the city. There are plenty cultural activities, from theater groups to large-scale concerts to circus festival. There's a lot of urban gardening going on, educational projects about nature and wildlife. Really, in many ways, it reflects everything that is important to the city of Berlin. And it's also super important for the social fabric of the city, with plenty of community engagement. At the moment, there are 26 different projects going on the field right now. And for the surrounding neighborhoods, the field is extremely important. It's partially very densely populated areas. Some of the areas are actually quite poor. Others are extremely impacted by gentrification. And for a lot of the citizens in Berlin, the Feld is the only garden that they can afford. So to us, it seems like space, specifically in a densely populated area in Berlin, and specifically when we're talking about the city growing, space is one of the most valuable commodities that we have. And none of these activities are competing with each other because there is so much space. And that's also in many ways why I would say the Feld is actually a place for quiet and peace in a way. And it's not just because it's one of the only places without noise pollution, but also because, again, there's so much space that actually all of these people can be on the Feld and it's still okay and nobody kind of bothers each other. I think specifically the pandemic years showed that to us. So I think if I want to sum up what the Feld means to us in Berlin right now, I'd probably just say that it's the beach of Berlin. It's the sky, the wind, the space, the place to see your friends, to come together. And, for everybody on this call who hasn't seen the place, I think what I would just say is that, I could continue talking about it and what it means to me or to us. Just, go and visit it. Go on a good weather day, have a look, see it, what it does also to you when you walk through the houses, through the construction, and then you end up and see the sky and you come together and you watch the sunset with your friends. So it's not just the present, it's also the future, to be honest. Often we're told by officials that the Feld is a nice to have, but that maybe the city cannot afford to keep it, as if it were a luxury. We really think it's the other way around. In times of climate change, when cities have to adapt to a new reality, we don't have the luxury to give up the Feld. We cannot afford to lose green spaces and a green giant lung that we still have in the city. it's actually crazy when you think about the fact that more people die annually because of heat waves than because of traffic accidents. And yes, climate change is talked about, but what does it mean concretely when we think about cities and when we think about green spaces? So really for us, it's not a luxury to have the city. One last thing that I want to show you regarding climate change in the future is that this map here shows you how important the Feld is as a cold air production area, that it actually cools down the whole city. And this will only become more dramatic as we see climate change hitting. So in a fascinating way, the past, present, and the future of Berlin are really connected to the Feld. But that's our little intro to all of this. Obviously, we know that this is not the end of the story. Basically, let me quickly share again. Basically, the government of Berlin, right from the beginning, knew that they wanted to construct on the Feld. They were already in conversations with the real estate lobby. So when it was open to the public in 2010, the government never really questions that there would be construction. They, opened the park in 2010 to the public, but it was on a very temporary and, before we start building, you can all come here and then we see what happens. But the people of Berlin fell in love with Feld and they didn't want to accept that decision. So what did we do to save the field? Citizens started to organize themselves and a multitude of citizens initiatives were created. We're not the only one. We are very often the most visible one because we did the referendum. But again, right from the beginning, there were lots of people invested in preserving the field. And we chose to do a referendum because we knew that was in a way the only way. And when I say we, it wasn't me. I joined later, and we have a couple of people actually on this call who wrote the law, and I'm still in awe, of all of their expertise. But I think from what I heard, they choose this way because they were quite clear that the government was determined to build, that there was no room to negotiate. And they had to find a way to save the Feld without depending on the government's goodwill, because this goodwill wouldn't come. And quite frankly, it's still not there. So good call. So the Feld was still the property of the city. No contract was signed yet. And they realized that because it's still property of the city, they were able to write a law to protect the Feld and its character. And if they were able to get this law into the Code of Laws of Berlin by means of direct democracy, it would be just a completely normal law protecting the Feld, even though it was written by citizens and voted in by citizens. And that's exactly what they did. So, as you can imagine, it was a lot of work from writing the law to the campaign, and we will talk more about the law and how it actually works later on. But a few more sentences on the campaign. Referendums in Berlin are actually a long process. It's 2 years, it's intense discussions, it's several phases of collecting signatures before you end up at a referendum. So it's not a quick question where somebody's just jumped at and asked, so what do you think? Yes, no, and that's it. It was a really intense process. And I think for us, education was always one of the main parts of it. And I think also you only get away with education because you need to collect so many signatures by hand that really you need to have a good pitch in order to get to that. So what do? You talk to people as much as you can. You go through legal reviews, you collect signatures, all of these things. And one of the things that I just want to stress right now, we were a complete underdog. We had no money. We were all volunteers. We came from very diverse backgrounds. And of course, in times of a housing crisis, I think in many ways, one of the questions was, is this too much of a local issue? Will people really care about this? How do people, on the other side of the city feel about it, et cetera, et cetera. But we went into this debate, we did our research, and we just, again, talked to people as much as we could. Because we knew that at the end of the day, what we really wanted was that at least the whole city had a say in the question of what happens to the Feld. That it's not just up to a couple of people in power to decide. So in our campaign, we always prioritize talking to people, bringing our arguments, engaging in the bigger question, as well as in the details about budgets and construction plans. Because the bigger question really is, what city do we want to live in, and how can we participate in it? How can we help to create the city that we actually want to live in? We did this again in a guerrilla kind of style because we didn't have any money. But in the end, it was a complete miracle. Nobody expected it. We won. And we won actually quite extensively, because if you look here at the numbers, 740,000 people voted for us. If you compare that, for example, to the latest results of the last election from the parties, the CDU party had 230,000 votes. The SPD had, these are actually the results from before, but basically these are always the results of the parties. So the Feld is actually in many ways much more popular than our established parties. And it was not just that, but that really in many ways, you could see that for the very first time, there wasn't an East and West divide. So East Berlin and West Berlin both voted in favor of the Feld. You could see that there wasn't a difference between inner city districts and the suburbs. Again, both voted in favor of the Feld. And that's actually quite a strong argument. So here we are, 2014, with a law that is written by citizens themselves and that the citizens voted into our code of law. So it's actually the only place where the citizens had a say in it like that. And to be honest, there were even 2 referendums on it, because there was also one before about the airport itself. So Berlin always liked to talk about the Tempelhofer Feld. Cool, end of story, right? Happy ending, we voted, everything's great. Unfortunately not. We dismantled with this referendum the plans of the government. And here we are now 10 years later, and we're still talking about it. So what is the situation right now? The law is in place. The law is in place. The Tempelhofer Feld is protected by this law, but our government still wants to build on it. And they have been quite vocal about that super early on. Here you can see two screenshots from articles from the year after the referendum, where Michael Müller, the mayor, who used to be the person who actually was responsible for the whole plan of constructing the city under the previous mayor, and then he became the mayor the year after. He already a year after said that there needs to be a new debate. And then again, in the same year, they already changed the law a little bit to make it possible to have temporary housing on the field. So right from the beginning, they were quite clear that this is just a pause, and that again, at some point you need to talk about it again. But before I want to go into more sneaky tactics and actually debunk a couple of myths on what the situation is right now, I really want to say that exactly this behavior, exactly talking about a referendum in that way, is super, super damaging to our democracy, and that it actually makes, is harmful on many, many ways for what we're trying to do when we talk about politics and participation and how do we create a city together. This is the one place in Berlin that we did a referendum about. And this is the one place that is always on the top of the list for major construction projects. It's very often the very first place that is called when you need to have a quick solution. It's always the one place that actually the people of Berlin decided. And it's one thing to disagree or to have a different opinion, but when we talk to people, very often what we hear is how disrespected they feel by the politicians, that they constantly bring this up again. And I think in many ways, and I don't want to be too harsh, but in many ways, the message behind this is that it doesn't really matter what citizens vote for. Those in power will try to get the answer that they want. And if they ask again and again, and then they do a new process and they have a new participation form, at some point they will get to what they want. And I think this is a super dangerous message, specifically now. We believe in democracy. We also did the referendum because, again, it's about asking the city what they want to do. And we do our work to show that participation matters and that we can actually shape how our cities look like and what is important to us. So so for example, Christian Gebler, the senator for city development, construction and housing, said, last year, the aim is actually not to discuss whether, but how. How disrespectful is that? To basically skip the whole yes and no question that we had in the referendum before, and to say, again, we don't want to talk about whether we do it, but just how we do it. So let's get to the law. I think what I want to start with is just to say that, again, this law is an extensive law. It was written by very, very smart people. I'm more the communications person in many ways, but I will present to you a little bit the idea of the law behind it, because we don't have time to get into all of the details anyway, but I can recommend it's a really, really, really good reading. The objective of the law really is to preserve the Tempelhofer Feld, not the building, but the Feld, for the many, not for the few, to really preserve the character of the space, to leave it open on purpose, and of course to see what is possible, to develop it and to create and reinvent, but while honoring its character and its purpose as a place for all people, for common use, for generations to come. For nobody to just come in and exclude anybody, or take a little bit of of this space, a little bit here, make something into an enclosure, so that only those who can afford it, or only those who are more privileged, can have access to it. The thought of the Feld really is that it is accessible for everybody, and that it stays like that. So very often the narrative that we hear is that the needs of the people are competing. That is an either or. Either you have affordable housing or recreational space. But we reject that premise. And we reject that premise because, again, because we think that the Feld like this is actually a place for everybody, instead of competing, instead of playing into this narrative of competing needs. But also because most of the times when we actually look in detail into all of these subjects, we see that the either or structure actually doesn't hold up. That very often it's not even, how to say, it's actually not true. That's not how life works. That's not how development works. So we thought we end by debunking a couple of myths about the Feld. So very first one, and I'm sure that all of you guys have heard it before, but you have to build on the Feld because of the housing crisis. Again, nobody's denying that we have a massive crisis around renting and around housing. But if you actually look into this, you end up very often with some quotes like this: building on green spaces is not a cost-effective and a sustainable solution to the lack of housing, neither in terms of social compatibility and environmental justice, nor in terms of preserving natural resources and promoting biodiversity. So maybe some of you think this is something that we have written down in one of our brochures, but actually this is part of the result of a resolution from the Advisory Board for Nature Conservation and Landscape Management from July this year. So this was something that was commissioned by the Senate, by the government. And I think in many ways it kind of shows that, again, those experts who are really looking into it very often say that it's not easy to build on the Tempelhofer Feld. That because there's different kinds of pollution, because there is no infrastructure around it. Actually, it's quite expensive, and that's why very often people and experts doubt that you can actually have affordable housing on the Tempelhofer Feld, apart from all of the climate change arguments that we already said. So again, very often the experts say not a good idea in itself. Another commissioned by the government report that I want to mention is actually the STEP 2040, the Urban Development Plan, where again the Senate has drawn up a plan on what we need in terms of living space, presumably by 2040, and how much space we will have by 2040 as a city. What was the result, again, of this by the Senate commissioned study? 220,000 apartments will be needed by 2040. And there are, at the moment, without the Feld, already potential areas for 250,000 apartments. Again, we have a problem, but the problem is not that we need to build on the field. The field is not going to change anything regarding the renting situation in the city. So next one, with this law, you cannot do anything. It means standstill. The law is completely conservative, nothing is possible. And that is actually not true. I mean, I think the question is, what do you want to do with it? Because of course, it's not possible to construct on the Feld, because again, the purpose of the law is that the character of the Feld remains the same. So it's not possible to build anything that requires a building permit. It's not possible to sell any of the property. It's not possible to do any contracts around this. And actually, it's a self-imposed obligation by law that the Berlin Senate is not selling it or changing the character of the Feld. That's part of the law. It's paragraph number 5, as I was told. So yes, it's true that the law is restrictive, but a development of the space is still absolutely possible. And a lot of things actually have happened. So what you can see is that, and again, it depends a little bit on the area, but in many ways, everything that really goes into the idea of the Feld, recreational space, sport, people coming together, nature, food, all of these things are possible in some way or the other. And actually, there's even more possibility because there are 32 buildings on the Feld that are currently not all in use. So there is a lot of possibility to actually work with the buildings that are on the field to see what is possible. And I'm not even talking about the massive, massive, massive building of the airport itself. These are just other buildings that are on the field that are completely open to development, where actually, of course, we would love to see more development in many ways. So that's that. Here you can actually see a couple of these, buildings. And again, we will also share a complete list of all of our resources so that you can have a look at it for yourself. And last but not least, I think I would also want to say that we still see a lot of options to make the Feld even more accessible for the people of Berlin. So for example, at the moment, the south side doesn't have a direct connection to the Feld. And it's actually quite a poor area where a lot of people might benefit a lot from a direct access to the Feld. Again, there are lots of ways to think about this within the law and to see what is possible, apart from, again, the possibility of building temporary constructions, for example. I think this is now the second year where there's a massive wooden amphitheater constructed on the Feld. That is a temporary construction that is used for the whole summer for beautiful cultural programs. So it's a little bit, I don't know, sad to see how limiting sometimes people think when they think that they can't build anything that requires a building permit. So last but not least, the people of Berlin have changed their minds. Now they would want to build. Jolene already mentioned it, that actually we have the perfect example for that. And it was given by the Senate itself, because before the competition of ideas for architects, they started this whole process of a dialogue workshop, Dialogwerkstatt it was called, where they had 150 citizens that were chosen randomly, and they worked together over a couple of weeks. And from what I've heard, were intense discussions, tough discussions. It's not that, the people came in, they were randomly chosen. They were not all in favor of the law when they started with this process. And really, again, this participation process was initiated to see what the citizens of Berlin want. And after weeks and weeks and weeks, and after rounds of discussions, at the end, in the final round, none of the groups wanted construction on the Feld. None of them. And actually the winning proposal was, I think, all of them were completely conformed with the law of the Tempelhofer Feld. And the winning proposal at the end actually was actually the most radical one that said that, they don't want to change a lot of things. But I'm sure that my colleagues on the call can also, jump in for that one. So again, to come back to the damage of democracy, the people of Berlin, the one time with the one process, again, where the people of Berlin were asked after the referendum, where they had quite a strong vote, they again said the same thing, that they don't want construction on the Tempelhofer Feld, that they don't believe that the Tempelhofer Feld needs to be constructed on in order to solve the housing crisis. And it just starts to be, again, more and more disrespectful, that there's this continuous language of, we want participation, we want to ask you, but when you tell us what you want, we're not going to listen to you. So I really want to close with that because yes, it's about the Feld. It's about a place that all of us love and all of us enjoy our summers on the field and even the winters. But it's also about more. It's about taking citizens serious. It's about democracy in itself. It's about participation. Because again, I think when we talk to our friends and people, very often the reaction is, what? You're still doing that? Why do you still have to do that? Why is that still a discussion? And I think that is in many ways so harmful to democracy, that we feel like it's a never-ending story and that it's actually not about the people, but about the people in power. And that's that. Bika, back to you.
Thank you so much. This was brilliant and really, really helpful. We don't have much time for questions, but there's one thing on my mind. So you mentioned sneaky tactics, and you know, I think before knowing more about your initiative, I kind of understood it as the initiative that keeps the field from being built on, but I didn't know that you're actually also engaged in improving the field. So you know, that you have made several attempts at improving accessibility, planting trees, and so on. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that tension. You mentioned about, you know, in this diagram, all the things that you're for, and I think we're also architects for Tempelhof, and there are ways and things that we can improve on the Feld. And it seems like the government is actually trying to almost disinvest from the field in order to, you know, make it seem like, oh, it's not that great, right? We can kind of build on it, essentially. So I'm wondering if you could just speak to that briefly.
Sure. And again, I mean, there are also other people from the initiative in this call, so by all means, jump in. You can also, I think I was told that we can also speak in German for those who, you know, feel more comfortable, and then we would translate it.
Yep.
Yes, I think again, the job of, you know, our government would be to have a whole concept for the whole city and to not just focus on one place. I think in the chat there were you know, a couple of other examples of failures of these big, massive projects. And I think that's a little bit what we're seeing, that again, it's the Tempelhofer Feld that is pulled up again and again and again. Again, there's at the moment, it's still not 100% clear what's going to happen to the building itself, where again, why don't you start with the building, apart from the fact that, you know, the field should remain as it is. But whatever it is, whether it's, for example, housing refugees, that was something that was used twice, and we actually felt that it was an incredible, how to say, yeah, an incredibly insulting way to instrumentalize people who are fleeing from conflict and out of very different circumstances, and to put them on a felt where there's, you know, in containers. This is not a living situation. So for example, back then we collaborated closely with the Refugee Council of Berlin, because again, it's not against the people. We are not here to talk against people and human rights ever, but this is not a way to treat people in general. And it was used to change the Tempelhofer Feld Gesetz law. Other things, or, you know, again, I think whatever it is, whatever the question is, in many ways, whether it's a housing crisis, whether it's, you know, housing for refugees, whether it's about, yeah, very often Tempelhofer Feld always seems to be the very first answer to that, and we just don't buy into that.
Thanks so much. I would like to keep talking and discussing with you, but I think we have to move on now to, so from our group, Shalini, an architect with a focus on natural resources, and Fanny, who is a landscape architect. The two of them banded together and they'll present an ecological, experiential, and social reading of Tempelhof in a couple of minutes. So with that, I give the word to the two of them.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so we'll keep it short. Our aim is to show you the ecological significance of Tempelhof at two scales. One is at the scale of the 300 hectares within the boundary of the largest green space in Berlin, where we have rare grassland ecosystems that store significant amounts of carbon in their soils and roots, helping mitigate climate change. We have over 300 wild plant species contributing to Berlin's biodiversity. We have nesting sites for the endangered Eurasian skylarks, which are species that depend on vast and undisturbed open spaces, and they build their nests on the ground. So the habitat in Tempelhof is really significant and unique. We also have seasonal stopover habitats for migratory birds like the common swift, which travel from as far as South Africa. And we also have grazing sheep that maintain the grasslands while promoting soil health, which is an example of sustainable land management in an urban context. At the larger connective scale, Tempelhof links to other permeable and vegetated adjacent spaces that weave through the urban fabric and provide ecological benefits far beyond the perimeter of the field. These benefits, like water drainage, temperature regulation, et cetera, work in tandem and create an overall more robust and climate resilient city. Severing this connective tissue by building along even just the perimeter of the Feld would have enormous ecological implications, such as habitat fragmentation, obstructed airflow, and increased surface runoff, among other things. As architects and designers, we have the responsibility to recognize Tempelhofer Feld not just as a recreational space, but as an essential piece of Berlin's ecological infrastructure. Its preservation ensures the city remains resilient, biodiverse, and climate adaptive. So let's now shift our focus to the social and experiential dimensions, which are inseparable from the Feld's ecological importance and vital to its preservation. Take it away, Fanny.
Okay, thank you. As I already put some of the social and experiential values very well in her input talk earlier already. So this is basically a sum up of Tempelhofer Feld's greatest spatial strength and why it shouldn't be built upon. So Tempelhofer Feld is a multi-layered public space that accommodates a wide variety of uses that coexist and interact. While many know the Feld as a venue for gardening, for sports, celebrations, recreations, it's also a space for connection, for exchange, for participation and civic engagement. Tempelhofer Feld is a democratic, flexible, and experimental space, free from private ownership and imposed constraints, and it stands as an inclusive resource open to all Berliners and visitors and plays a critical role in fostering equity by providing a shared environment accessible also to lower income, disadvantaged, and marginalized groups. Moreover, its influence transcends its boundaries, with its permeable edges integrating into adjacent urban and residential areas. The introduction of vertical barriers or construction along its edges would fundamentally disrupt this open framework, fragmenting its interconnected social, spatial, and ecological functions and diminishing its role as a shared resource for all. Beyond its human uses, Tempelhofer Feld seamlessly integrates with can you switch back to the slide before? It seamlessly integrates, no, the one before. Yes, that one, thank you. It seamlessly integrates with non-human life, as Shalini highlighted earlier. It supports the coexistence of animals and plants, fostering multi-species interactions within a mosaic of landscapes and ecosystems. These include expansive open grasslands, vegetated edges, areas of natural succession, and many more. We couldn't agree more with Jean-Philippe Vassal's quote that we heard in the intro video a little earlier: you should never demolish the emptiness of Tempelhof. However, what Vassal refers to as emptiness is in fact a vastness, an unparalleled spatial quality in the dense fabric of Berlin. Tempelhofer Feld is far more than empty. It's a place of openness and possibility. And this vastness holds immense experiential and educational value. It provides uninterrupted views, Weitblick, where one can clearly perceive the horizon and feel a sense of closeness to the sky. And it invites people to experience natural and atmospheric phenomena such as the change in light, sunrise, sunset, the interplay of weather or the force of wind. And these immersive encounters cultivate environmental awareness, foster a sense of belonging and identity with the site, and inspire a deeper connection to the city's urban nature. And that's what we call radical felt awareness. Okay. Vika, it's your turn again.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. No? Okay, sorry about that. We had some echo here. All right, thank you. Thanks to both of you so much. We now go to the core of the question, which is how not to build. And so I'll also be launching a poll here and ask you what you think, all of the people on the call now, because we want to hear from you, because as we mentioned at the beginning, we're also figuring it out ourselves. I mean, it's been, you know, not even a week that it's launched. And so really one of the main questions with this competition is, should we participate or not? And so you know, in a way, if some of you have looked into the competition text, it's quite vague and it's leaving a lot of things open, but it's also mentioning the word Bebauung 44 times in the document. So it has pretty clear intentions while also being seemingly inclusive. So, you know, one could call that sneaky tactics again. They are mentioning, you know, the 100% Tempelhofer initiative. They are mentioning a lot of different actors in the space, but at the same time, they keep talking about building on the site. And the whole idea is that they're just pooling all these different creative ideas and proposals and so on. And that will just serve as a sort of further discussion. But opening up the discussion, we've seen what that means for the Senate. It basically seems like a way to try to open up the discussion in a very particular direction. And so, you know, are we, by participating, potentially legitimizing what the Senate is doing, or are we, you know, even if we submit an empty proposal or one that doesn't include building or one that doesn't include a sort of change outside of the Tempelhofer law, we might still, in some sense, support their dialogue. On the other hand, you know, it could be a way to enact change. It could be a way to be part of the conversation. So yeah, with that, I kind of want to ask you, and here I'll start the second poll here. Oops, here. Okay, here we go. And you should be seeing how not to build. So the first answer is not participating in a competition and raising awareness, right? So you could be doing that. You could be participating, but actually following what the Tempelhofer Gesetz is, you know, enshrining in law, and do that as kind of with a genuine proposal, like really putting your efforts in to make it according to Tempelhofer Gesetz and try to get into the conversation. You could be participating, but not actually kind of doing some kind of protest participation, or you could just completely self-organize, you know, do an open exhibition. And we are also, you know, specifically talking about all of these options and also supporting all of these options in different ways. So we do want to stay in conversation with you about that. And yeah, I'm seeing the polls come in. Interesting. So participating in a competition, is everyone seeing the results live or just me? Are you seeing them? Oh yeah, everyone's seeing them live. Okay, perfect. So I see quite a lot of participation, but with sort of following the law, or actually as actually the protest statements are going high up as well. Very interesting. So this is also specifically this response that we can collectively have, and I think we have a power in the numbers that we have here, is what we will be talking about next time. So one thing you can do right now, there is time for queries, for responses until the 25th, so next week, which again is an extremely short timeline. But you know, you could basically how to say it, clog the administrative pipeline by asking a lot of questions. Only registered architects are allowed to participate. So if you're not registered, you can also write to us. You can send your questions to us. We can ask them for you potentially. But definitely, you know, that's one possible way to kind of have them basically ask the questions directly to the competition organizers, and also they have to respond. So, and there can also be a little bit of pressure to essentially extend the competition deadline. And if the questions get extended, then potentially the competition deadline, which is unrealistic, right? It's 2 months from the mid of November. With the holidays, it's essentially impossible to do a serious project in that time. I'm gonna stop the poll, but I think you can still see it. Share results. Okay. So that's an immediate thing you can do. Then the assembly on the 3rd of December, the link is already out. Maybe somebody from our team can post a link if you haven't already, so you can join the next assembly where it's going to be much more specific. We'll talk about the specific strategies, how not to build, and already the poll has given us some sense now, I think. You know, you can follow us on Instagram if you haven't, and then join the mailing list for updates. And that is essentially that. With that, I want to give the last words to Josh, who's also a landscape architect, who will speak a little bit about the international kind of reach of that and meaning of that project, because it's not just local, it's definitely sort of something that happens over and over again in different countries and places. But also, I would love to take a selfie with you, a Zoom selfie. So if everyone can, before you go, turn on their camera, and we'll try to just open up the grid and maybe wave at us. Yay! Good. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and to Jochen. Oh, sorry, Josh.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to wrap up with some closing comments. I want to look at the big picture for a moment, since we have a lot of people on this call from outside of Berlin and outside of Germany. So thank you very much for believing in Tempelhofer Feld and for helping us to defend it. I want to say something about the larger importance of Tempelhofer and how our situations are connected even in different cities and different countries. So first of all, many of us face similar problems. Rents are exploding everywhere. And with regards to the climate crisis, our cities are not undertaking the transformations that they need to. In fact, many times our countries are doing urban development in a way that contributes to these problems rather than making them better. So the question kind of presents itself: if we have similar problems, then we have similar solutions. Our fight today to defend the field is obviously indebted to the first initiative's fight up to 2014. It saved the park, and it also created a new sort of citizens council, which to this day self-administers the maintenance of the park. But the first initiative has an even greater importance for Berlin. The whole episode leading up to 2014, including there, I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but there was already sort of, you know, in addition to the city's fake plan, the city's sort of awful plan was created by a participation process. But this was stopped with the victory of the first referendum. And this victory helped create the political consensus within the government and among many other people that it was time for a better form of participation. In the years afterward, this led to some urban development projects where people really started experimenting with different forms of participation. And today there's a new generation of initiatives which look back on those experiments as models to improve upon again and try and create new kinds of institutions which could be used for self-administration of housing, for care work, for the future, a future in a more precarious world than we have today, where due to the climate crisis, we will depend on each other even more. So that's one way the campaign was influential, but there's another way. The campaign also taught another way of initiatives afterward who wanted to follow in a similar strategy of the citizens' referendum. This opened up space for more radical demands, such as the housing expropriation campaign in Berlin, which is still ongoing and would socialize 250,000 apartments and bring them under a tenant governance model. So it's our hope that we will not only win this competition and defend the field, but we can maybe even gain new ground and start to win a better urban planning in Berlin. We know that in 2014, defending Tempelhofer Feld had further ripples and echoes outward, and we know that if we defend the field here again today with your help, it could do the same. So what we're asking you is not just will you help make some drawings and help us out in Berlin, but asking you maybe also after you finish this campaign, will you continue the fight in your own cities to win democratic urban planning? And when you do so, maybe we can all help each other out again. I know that in seeing each other's strategies and struggles, we learn how to win that way. So yeah, the climate crisis doesn't leave us a lot of extra time, so we can't really wait. And I'll leave it there until the next meeting. I can't wait to hear some of your ideas. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you all. See you all next time and stay in touch. Follow us, keep the discussion up. Thanks so much. Bye.